My dad, younger brother, and I went to see Bridge of Spies this Thanksgiving, and we had a lot to talk about it. So, let's talk a bit about the basic plot. This lawyer, James Donovan, who used to work on criminal cases, is assigned to defend a Russian spy during the Cold War. I believe the year is 1960. It may span a few years. The spy, Rudolf Abel, is found out and imprisoned by the United States. Now, at this time, a new plane is developed by the Air Force capable of taking detailed photographs at 70,000 feet over enemy territory, which is more than twice the elevation of the summit of Mount Everest, which is 29,000 feet. Now, the Soviets have missiles that can reach that height, and a pilot named Powers is shot down. He survives, parachutes to the ground, and is captured by the Russians. Also at this time, the Berlin Wall is being constructed between East and West Germany. And the Germans detain a 25-year-old student who is in Germany researching economics and was trying to cross the wall with his girlfriend. So this lawyer is a serious believer in everyone being entitled to a defense, even though the United States population hates Abel's guts. I mean, this is the Cold War. The two superpowers are in a perpetual hair's width away from mutual nuclear destruction. So, let's talk a little bit about that history. After the conclusion of World War II, which ended with both the fall of Nazi Germany and the United States' destruction of the Japanese cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki with the atomic bomb, the major world powers were the United States and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, formerly and later known as Russia. This Soviet Union had been ruled by the Communist Party since the fall of the Russian Empire in 1917. Communism is a somewhat more extreme version of socialism. The socialist goals of equality become attractive in Russia when the Romanovs turn a blind eye to their people's poverty and suffering. The problem with socialism is that it strives for wealth allocation regardless of work effort, which fails because it takes away the incentive to improve. And governments absolutely suck at resource allocation to begin with. Anyway, the USSR and the United States, which is a capitalist nation and thus just about the polar opposite of a communist society, were very frightened of each other and were competing with each other in territory and technology. There were no direct battles between them during the Cold War, but there were proxy conflicts, which included the Korean, the Vietnam, and Afghanistan wars. By the time the Soviet Union and the United States both had nuclear weapons, a war between them was a very real threat, and you'll occasionally see period piece commercials and cartoons from this time telling people to hide under their desks or in their basements in the event of a bombing. In the film, you can see Donovan's young son making plans in case of such a war. The world was very much on edge at this time. So you can't really blame America for hating Russian spies, and vice versa. Donovan knows that Abel is a spy, but he respects him because America also sends out spies. They do their job, they're loyal to their countries, and Abel is a good spy. He gives him a sentence of 30 years in prison rather than the death penalty, with the reasoning that he might be useful in a trade for a captured American spy. This proves to be the right decision, as the United States is in need of someone to trade very soon. But also, prisoners are often valuable in warfare for this very reason. It's why captured soldiers are many times not simply executed by the enemy, because the enemy is going to want their soldiers and spies back too, and to do that, they need people to trade. so prisoners of war are strategically useful. But there's a problem this time. The Americans have only one person, and they want two back. The East Germans hold the student, and the Russians hold the spy pilot. Now, Donovan's advisors, the American government, keep telling him, you need to get the pilot, forget about the student. And this was the basis for a few discussions between my dad, brother, and myself, and we all pretty much agreed that, yeah, the pilot really should be the priority, but there's a few things to understand about Donovan pushing for training for both. The United States government is sending him to negotiate with the Germans and the Russians as a private citizen. They do not give him the position of being a representative of the government. And the Germans and Russians actually get a little offended by this, that Americans would send a person with no official standing to trade with them. Donovan understands that the East Germans are desperate to be recognized and their authority legitimized, and so arranging a prisoner trade with a major world power, such as the US, would accomplish this. Meanwhile, the Russians are really going to want their spy back. And so he assesses that trading for 1 for 2 is possible if he stays strong, despite the fact that both the Russians and Germans are constantly pissed that he's trying to make the same deal with 2 countries at once. Once he pushes for this, I think Donovan feels that he really can't back down, even at the risk of the entire deal or deals falling apart, or both opposing countries will see him and the United States as weak, even though he's not actually been given official representative status. And the whole deal with that, with the American government sending a private citizen, is all because they didn't want to take responsibility should the negotiations fail. And the people who recruit Donovan even say this. There's a guy who, word for word, says to him, "We cannot be embarrassed." And they also tell them that if things go wrong, if he's trapped or captured, or finds himself in a really bad position, they can't do anything for him. It's typical government cowardice. It's still going on today all the time, and it's sickening. I haven't talked much about the spy, Abel, since the beginning of this video. There's not a whole lot to him in the movie, other than he's a loyal soldier. And whenever he's in a rough position, like when his defense seems hopeless, or when it looks like he may not be going home, Donovan asks him if he's upset or worried, and Abel says, "Will it help?" Which seems funny, but it's actually a common Russian mentality, a kind of fatalism. It's more sad than funny, even though it does kind of sound funny when he says it. I like the guy. He's the enemy, but he's a very admirable person. And both Tom Hanks and Mark Rylance do an outstanding job as their characters. This isn't a war battle movie, it's a war politics movie, but for being that, it's very good and it's enjoyable and it's genuinely suspenseful. Definitely see it if you're into war movies or history movies. And this is based on a true story. So at the end, of course, the film will give brief epilogues of what happened to them after the Cold War.